Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I want to thank all of you who have watched my videos, who have liked them, and who have subscribed to the channel. I want to ask you to help me reach 1,000 subscribers. So those of you who haven't subscribed, please do so. And remember to like the videos that you watch to help push them out for others to see. And again, I thank you all so much for coming to the channel and watching. A lot of you really enjoyed the Queen of Menorenis video, and I loved that story and I really wanted to tell it, so I made sure it was one of my main videos to push out. But I have another story that I think is almost as good as that one. That one will always be my favorite, but this one runs pretty close as far as my warrior stories. And I think you'll like this one too. It's inspirational. And it just goes to show you what you can accomplish when you just really give your enemy hell. So sit back and enjoy this story. When you look at the map of Africa, have you ever really paid attention to South Africa and noticed this little bitty country sitting smack dab in the midst of the country of South Africa? So a country within a country. That country is called Lesotho. I've seen it on the maps, never gave it, much thought. Don't know why. I think most of us probably have. And I'm sure there are a lot of you who know the story of Lesotho, but there are a lot of us who didn't. So I did a little research and looked up what is the story behind this country within a country. And I found it to be a really fascinating story. So let's talk about the country of Lesotho and how it came to be. In the early 19th century, the Caledon River region in southern Africa was occupied by a diverse group of people. And throughout this video, I'm going to show you some of the people that occupied that area then and now. Some of those at that time were the Sotho people, the Tswana people, and the Nguni people. The Sotho people were the dominant group at this time in the region. The king at this time was King Moshoeshoe I, and he united all of the Sotho-speaking people, or Bantu-speaking people, into one nation, and he changed the name to the Basuto Nation, or Basuto land. Now, in 1833, King Moshoeshoe invited missionaries to visit the country. These missionaries were from the Paris Evangelical Missionary Society. They came to the country, they promoted Christianity, but the negative side is they tried to undermine King Moshoeshoe's rulership. What their attempt was to set up closer ties with the European settlers in the area, which were mostly Boers or Burghers. So what he wanted to do, or what they wanted to do, was to take the Basuto people and make them less dependent on their chief and more dependent on the white settlers. So, in my opinion, that was kind of a mistake on King Moshoeshoe's part for inviting them in. They did not have good intentions. Now, around 1820, King Moshoeshoe found himself in a battle or little skirmish with a neighboring tribe. And during this time, he noticed that the white settlers who were in the area utilized weapons which they did not have, which were rifles and guns. And he wanted those. So what he started doing around 1820 was stockpiling horses and guns. So between 1820 and 1843, he stockpiled horses and guns to the point where he had more than any chief in South Africa. Of course, this is a pattern that we kind of saw here in the U.S. when the Black Panthers marched on the steps of the Capitol, and quickly laws were changed regarding weapons and guns here in the U.S. Same thing here. In 1852, the British, who were occupying the area, signed the Sand River Convention with the Boers. So just keep in mind, you had the British coming in, occupying territory and just taking land and doing what we know now historically that they did. And then you had the Boers, who were white settlers and farmers who arrived in the Cape area in 1652, mostly from Netherlands and then later from France and Germany. And what the Sand River Convention was that the British signed with the Boers was a bill that banned the sale of guns to Africans, but they themselves could buy, sell, and trade between themselves under the Bloemfontein Convention of 1854. Because of this, it forced the Basuto people to rely on smuggled in weapons, and they also had to make their own gunpowder locally. So the end result is that the Boer Orange Free State was able to obtain high quality weaponry like breech loading rifles and small amounts of artillery, while the Basuto were having to get more inferior weaponry because they were having to sneak it in. So we now get into the year of 1858, and conflict between the Basuto and the Orange Free State of the Boers occurred. It lasted about 10 years, and during this period, the Basuto suffered multiple losses due to the fact that they had inferior weaponry. So in 1866, the Basuto and the Boers signed the Treaty of Thaba Bosiu, which is where Moshoeshoe basically ceded most of his kingdom's arable land to the Boers. But the Boers didn't honor this treaty, no surprise. And what they began to do was a scorched earth campaign against the Basuto, which led to starvation among their people. So the Basuto sought protection from the British, and on March 12, 1868, Basuto land became part of the royal dominion of the British Empire. On March 11th, 1870, King Moshoeshoe I died. He was either 93 or 94 years old at the time of his death. On August 11th of 1871, a bill allowing the annexation of Basuto land into the Cape Colony was passed. The Cape Colony of the Burghers basically annexed and took their land without including them in any kind of governmental process or consulting them in any way. Not only that, but they immediately began to undermine the Basuto people by passing a series of laws which eventually took away the Basuto people's rights to govern themselves. These laws were passed again without the Basuto being consulted or informed. And these laws allowed the new government of the Boers to take land from the Basuto at their will and to do anything else they wanted to do. So basically, these white settlers came in, set up their own government, started passing their own laws, and ignoring the people who were there for centuries and centuries long before they came. You know, at this point, the Basuto people were fed up. They were tired of what was happening, and they were starting to get that urge to rise up and fight. One particular group of the Basuto people, which were the Bafuti people who settled in the southern corner of Basuto land, they were one of the first groups that kind of really struck out. They had a chief named Morosi, And he was once a tributary ruler of Moshoeshoe I. He was not happy at all with what was going on. So he rose up and kind of started the first fighting. He had a series of conflicts with the Cape government, the Boers, which eventually led to a big standoff. He was killed in this standoff, and what they did was they decapitated him and took his head and paraded his head through the town of King Williams. Disrespectful, because this is those people's land. You're invading them, and it's just so much. So after this, it just got worse. In 1878, the Peace Preservation Act was passed, and this allowed the white government to confiscate the arms of the African population in exchange for money, so they say. Now, this included the Basuto people as well. The white government also declared that the Kwithing region would be confiscated from the Basuto people for white settlers to live in. So these people were just doing the most. They didn't know when to stop. They were just parasitic invaders, in my opinion, at this point. And as I'm even talking about this, it's making me angrier and angrier. So imagine living through this. Now, for the Basuto people, this was unacceptable. So they petitioned the laws to try to get these things undone, overturned. But, they didn't get a favorable result, which is what we would expect, because you're petitioning within a system that they built to benefit themselves. So what the Cape government did in response was that Governor Sir Henry Bartier Frere ordered the immediate disarmament of the Basuto, who had refused to give up their guns. Now, there were a few chiefs among the Basuto people who decided it was time to fight back. You have Chief Lerothali, who was the heir to the Basuto throne. Then you have Chief Letsi I, who is a major figure in this whole revolt that is about to occur. He was very highly trusted by the British and the Boer Cape government. And then you had his brother, Chief Masofa, and his nephew, Joel Malopo. Now, Chiefs Lerothali, Masofa, and Malopo, they all openly opposed and challenged this order, and they called for armed resistance. So Masofa began to fortify the Basuto stronghold at Thaba Bosiu. This frightened the white traders who were living in that area. So basically, the white traders, who were now afraid for their lives, abandoned Basuto land altogether. And the Cape government and the British went to Chief Letsi I, and they asked him to please go negotiate with the other chiefs to see if you can calm them down and stop things before it gets out of hand. So he says that he did go and speak with his brother Masofa, but all attempts failed. They were set on, pushing forward. So Joel Masofa, Malopo, Chief Masofa, and Lerothali, they all began to prepare for war. Now, Masofa observed the previous result, that Chief Morosi, who was killed in that revolt and had his head taken off, he observed that revolt, and he found that, in his opinion, the Cape troops were incompetent. On top of that, he knew that the British would refuse to help the Cape. So on September 13th, 1880, because they saw that the Basuto people were preparing for war and nothing was going to stop them, the Cape Mounted Riflemen Unit, or CMR unit of 212 men were led by a Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Carrington, and they marched and entered into Basuto land near the town of Wepner. They were there to help reinforce the town of Mafetang, which is where the magistracy sat. This at this time was kind of an isolated area. And the magistrate at that location was Arthur Barkley. He was the district magistrate. So he, along with 20 policemen, set out ahead to scout the area. So, because basically, when he learned that Colonel Carrington was coming to help him out, he was very happy about that. So he went out with 20 policemen to scout ahead to help out Colonel Carrington. And as he got 2 miles out from the magistrate, Barkley encountered 300 Basuto warriors who were being commanded by Lorothali on a hill overlooking the road. So Barkley approached Lorothali and advised him to surrender his arms and withdraw his troops. But Lorothali refused to do so. He was like, nah, I don't think so. And so he turned to ride back to his men. As in doing so, he saw Colonel Carrington and his troops coming. So at this point, Lorothali and his men basically charged downhill, and a short battle ensued. And there were some light casualties on both sides from this battle. And this was the start of the revolt. On September 17, 1880, a Cape Mounted Riflemen unit, or CMR unit, was attacked by 700 Basuto warriors near Mafetang. After this attack, the Cape Armed Forces mobilized themselves. They mobilized a force of 2,000 men. This force also had 3 RML 7-pounder mountain guns and 2 5.5-inch mortars. And they also rallied up small units of scouts and African levies. And these scout units typically consisted of civilian local Boers or burghers, and the African levies or African units basically consisted of African tribes who were loyalists to the Cape, basically fighting against their brothers to help stay under their oppression and their rule. I'll never understand that mentality. So in total, there were 3,000 white troops and 1,000 African troops. You know, for me, in my personal opinion, if I'm not going to be able to get out and fight for whatever reason, I am surely not about to help you, my enemy, oppress me and control me and my people. If I'm not going to help by fighting, I'm definitely not going to help push the enemy's cause. But you have those who just don't understand that they're fighting against or they're helping their own oppression. So we have the Cape troops assembled. Now the Basuto, on the other hand, they had 23,000 warriors led by Lorothali. 9,000 of these warriors were situated in the Mafetang district because most of the fighting was going on in that area. And some of the other warriors were guarding Letsi the First. They were guarding his ancestral village of Moresia. So the revolt begins. What we have is Masofa has blocked the CMR garrison of 200 soldiers at Maseru, the town of Maseru, and he burned the main buildings in this town. This was his first assault on that town. you have Joel Malapo, who was in the north, and Malapo attacked the town or village of Lotse, and he initiated a siege there. So basically, this rebellion was spread across Basuto land. Now, in the early stages of this rebellion, the Basuto were suffering heavy casualties whenever they attempted to do frontal assaults. So they learned from this mistake and they changed their tactics. So they began to utilize some of the tactics that the Boer commandos would use, where they would ambush you and then also defend fortified positions. So the Basuto would do quick attacks, heavy firing, and then quickly withdraw instead of doing straight on frontal attacks. Because you have to keep in mind, the whites in the area, whether British or Boer, had good weaponry because they were shipping in new weapons. They were shipping in as well artillery, which the Basuto did not have. They didn't have artillery. They had their rifles and guns, and they had their axes and things like that they fought with. So changing their tactics really helped improve their chances in this battle. Now, these Basuto warriors who were out fighting began to inspire other tribes in the area to rise up and fight. So you had the Basuto clans that were in the south of Drakensberg, who had been incited and inspired to fight by the rebels who were already participating. So they, on October 4th, began to participate and fight. Now, one of the Cape administrators over the town of Griqualand East wanted to try to stop the uprisings by negotiating with the Basuto people. But he learned that the Basuto were planning to assassinate him and members of his administration. So he quickly abandoned his attempts at negotiating a ceasefire and peace, and he basically evacuated his district, and he evacuated the white population from his districts as well to the town of Kokstad. But he left behind the black loyalists from the tribes of the Lubi and the Baka. So when the Basutos reached that area, the members of the tribes of the Lubi and the Baka who were loyalists to the Cape were massacred. So he saved his white people and he left behind the black people who were there on their side to be massacred. So, never trust your enemy. Now, at this time, you had other tribes in the area begin to enter the revolt. Other tribes rose up to fight. They had their various different reasons. The majority were the same. They were being controlled, invaded, land taken from, and other things that were going on with them. So they all kind of started rising up and joining in on this revolt. Some of those tribes that joined in were the Griqua and the Pondamized tribes in Kumbu and Solo districts, and the Kwati and Thembu clans in Thembuland. Now, in October, we're still in the year of 1880 at this point. So we're in the month of October, and Colonel Clark arrives to the town of Wepner, which is near Mafeking. If you remember earlier, Colonel Carrington brought troops into Wepner, which is near Mafeking, to try and fortify Mafeking. So you now have Colonel Clark entering into Wepner with the goal of trying to fortify Mafeking and provide relief, because the majority of the fighting was occurring in this region. And when Clark arrived, he arrived with 1,000 cavalry and 600 infantry. He had 40 wagons and 5 artillery pieces. Now, the Basuto chiefs were multilingual. They could speak their own native language as well as speaking English and French. The reason they were able to speak these languages because it wasn't just the British that were in that area. The French were also staking claim. All that stuff was going on. You've got the Boers, you've got the English, you've got the French is just being invaded from all sides, basically. So they could speak their native language, they could speak English, and they could speak French. And they were intercepting messages sent by the Cape, military. So what Clark did was he changed things up and he began to exchange messages with his troops and others in Greek so that the Basuto chiefs would not be able to read the messages. So as Clark is there to try and relieve some of what was going on in Mafetang, more fighting was still going on. We're on to October 19th. And Clark arrives on an isolated rock hill or a ridge, so to speak, there near Mafetang. And when he gets there, Lorothali is already there with 3,000 warriors behind the ridge overlooking the nearby road. So Clark's troops became under fire. They came under fire by Lorothali's troops. And the Cape troops, Clark's troops, were making an attempt to flank the Basuto warriors. But one of the chiefs who was fighting with Lorothali, Chief Saiso, he led 300 axe-wielding Basuto warriors to attack the troops who were trying to flank them. At the end of this battle, 32 people were killed and 7 were injured on the Cape Army side, and the Basuto lost 40 people. We are now into the month of November of 1880, and Colonel Carrington began destroying villages that were near him. And then as you go into the month of December, he got into multiple clashes with the Basuto warriors, leading us into 1881, January. So on January 14th of 1881, Colonel Brabant, another colonel from the Cape side who was fighting in this war, he led 380 cavalry and 180 infantry, along with 400 armed burghers or Boers. And what he did was he went ahead and sent the burghers ahead to capture the village of Radiamari. Now, remember, these burghers were basically civilian participants in this battle. So they went ahead to the village of Radiamari, 400 of them, and they burned and destroyed and killed in the village. But they decided on their own, without consulting with Colonel Brabant, to push forward. Now, their only assignment was to go to the village of Radiamari. That was it. They decided on their own to push forward to the village of Sepashel. What they didn't plan on was encountering what they did when they reached that village. So they get to the village of Sepashel because they're thinking they're going to go in there and kill and burn and destroy like they did in Radiamari. They got there and Sepashel was guarded by 8,000 armed warriors under the direction of Lorothali. The chief in this village was Chief Maama. When these burghers got to this village and they encountered 8,000 black men with rifles standing there looking at them like, really? Chief Mahama ordered the charge on the burghers. So they charged the burghers, who quickly withdrew, as anyone with common sense would. These burghers were hauling it, trying to get back to the Cape Army as quickly as possible. So as they're trying to haul it back to the Cape forces for reinforcement, the Basuto warriors were closing in on them. They were close behind them. But the burghers at least got into eyesight of the Cape forces just in time. And as the Cape forces saw they were being pursued by these warriors, they opened fire with artillery. And the artillery basically pushed the Basuto warriors back. And so the Basuto warriors went to all of the surrounding ridges and they shot downward onto the Cape forces. So you have the Cape forces firing their artillery to push some of them back, and you have some of the Basuto on the ridge tops firing down heavily onto the Cape forces. So that was just a hot mess. 400 little white men with their pride and their arrogance heading on into the village of Sepashel, only to encounter 8,000 armed black men who were like, not today, son, and chase their butts all of the way back to their Cape forces for reinforcement. So now let's see the first. We haven't talked about him much. I mentioned him earlier. While he has not participated in any of the fighting, you have not really heard his name. I mentioned earlier that he was very highly trusted by the British and the Cape. The white governments liked him. They believed that he was on their side. But let's see, the first was very clever and very sneaky. While he didn't fight, he did appear to support the Cape and the British, but he was also tactfully confiscating land from the Basuto loyalists. And I know in your mind you're like, well, that does sound like he's supporting them. But wait, hold on. He basically intentionally appeared to be weak and unintelligent to the white governments. That was his ploy, his game. He intentionally appeared to be weak and unintelligent while he was secretly communicating with the rebels and encouraging the rebellion. Loyalist leaders like Jonathan Malapo were ordered by Letzi to surrender their weapons to him. So again, you're like, he sounds like he's on the other side. But Letzi did this so that he could maintain control of the country. See, the British might try to come in and take a little more control, or the Cape might come in by force and try to take more control than what they already had if they believed that Letzi was not on their side. But by feeling like they had the leader, a leader kind of overseeing everyone on their side, they were a little more at ease. And by seeing him take weapons, they thought he was trying to help them. But what Letzi's plan was that he was taking the weapons from some of the ones he ordered to turn in their weapons. They were willingly doing it because Letzi was stashing these weapons in the event that the rebels were defeated, so that they would have weapons in the future to fight with. And he was confiscating land so that his people would have land stashed and set aside in case they were defeated. So he was thinking of the future. He was just kind of stashing things away while appearing to be on the side of the whites. But the whites continued to believe in him and his loyalty. So all I have to say is clever, clever. Now, we're still in the month of January of 1881. By this time, the Basuto are tired. The Cape forces are just kind of tired. They're spending a lot of money on this war. And, people are just wanting it to be over. The Basuto sued for peace. And the terms that they laid out in this suit were that they would get to keep their guns and maintain autonomous rule. Now, one of the other reasons they brought suit at this time, just which is kind of a background story, is it was maize harvesting season at this time for the Basuto people, maize being corn. And it's a major crop for them. And they were afraid that with so many men fighting, there weren't enough people to harvest their corn, and they could possibly face starvation in the upcoming year if they didn't harvest their crops. So this suit was a way to kind of stall and give them time to harvest their crops, while at the same time trying to hopefully bring an end to this battle and get what they want out of it. But, again, when you're petitioning or, suing or bringing any kind of claim against a government that is built to benefit them, the white people, and not you, you're not going to get the outcome you want. And their terms were rejected. The Cape government basically wanted total surrender from Basuto people, and they wanted for the rebel leaders to stand trial. But the Basuto was like, not today. We're not having that. So they didn't accept the terms. Because of that, on February 14th, 1881, Colonel Carrington led another force against the Basuto people. This battle was very intense, and the Basuto were basically surrounded and beaten back by heavy artillery. The battle continued into March, and on March 22nd, Carrington was severely wounded in an altercation near the Cape Forces camp at Ramadikwa. Let me try to say that again. I believe it's Ramabidikwa. So now we're heading into the month of April. I made an attempt to say that name. I'm just moving forward. Now, on April 17th of 1881, a meeting was held between Lerothalee and one of the representatives of the Cape government. His name was Griffin. And Letsie the First was the intermediary for this meeting. It lasted 12 days. And on April 29th, a peace agreement was reached. This peace agreement was called the Award. And in this agreement, the Basuto would get to keep their guns, but they would have to register them and pay an annual fee of £1 per weapon. The Basuto would also receive amnesty. The rebels who fought would receive amnesty. And the area of Quithing would remain part of Basuto land. The Basuto would pay a fine of 5,000 cattle and compensate the Basuto loyalists, those whose land was being taken and kind of stashed aside. But they would also have to compensate the white traders. This, to me, is a one-sided negotiation. Everything is about what the Basuto would do, but nothing about what the white Boers would do or give up or give. And as you can imagine, this peace agreement was met with opposition, and it was not easy to enforce this agreement. There were conflicts that actually arose between the rebel leaders, Malapo and Letsie. Now remember, Malapo is Letsie's nephew. Malapo refused the agreement outright. He didn't want any parts of it because he felt like this is their land, this is our stuff. Why should we give them anything, offer any kind of apologies? Because basically giving them something is like apologizing. He was not trying to have it. He just didn't feel like they should be giving up anything. They should be offering anything. And if necessary, and we have to go back to fight, that's what we should do. But we shouldn't give them anything. And, when you look at this agreement, it does kind of make you side-eye Let's the first, because he's kind of starting to look like he is sitting on the fence and leans whichever way he needs to maintain his power. If he has to make his people happy, he'll give a little bit there. If he has to make the white people happy, he'd give a little bit there. So Let's is kind of looking wishy-washy at this point, because I'm not sure why, as the mediator, this negotiation would have ended up with the Basuto having to give, but nothing from the Boers. So I'm with Malapo. I'm not giving them anything. Because of this, small raids occurred. There were a few attempts to negotiate, and the negotiations resulted in failure. And there was really, at this point, tension that lasted for the rest of their lives between Malapo and Letsi and Lorothali, because Lorothali was tired of fighting, and he was just happy to have some kind of negotiation. And he actually was willing to offer 3,000 cattle just himself alone, just to add, to help in this. And Malapo just wasn't interested in what they were offering. He wasn't willing to give in. On top of that, you have the white Cape people, the white government, the Boers, who didn't like this agreement. I'm not sure why. They weren't giving anything up, but they just had this mentality of they just wanted everything. So they themselves didn't like some of this, some or all of this agreement. So you had them doing constant protests from the Orange Free State. And there was just so much going on and so much chaos that there was just an inability to enforce laws in Basuto land. So at this point, the Cape Parliament passed the Disannexation Act. This was passed in September of 1883. So basically, they were like, nobody's happy. The Basuto and all the black people aren't happy, and they're still willing to fight if they have to. Our white people aren't happy. Nobody's happy. Everybody's protesting. People are battling. There's small skirmishes. There's all this stuff going on. They were like, yeah, we may have annexed you and just took your stuff without asking you a few years ago, but you know what? Take your stuff back. We're tired of you Negroes. This is just too much for us. So, hence, you get this Disannexation Act in September of 1883. Now, on November 29th of 1883, you had the majority of the Basuto chiefs who got together and met. And I say majority because Malapo was not present. And they had a majority vote to remain under the arm of the British. The reason they decided to do that was because they felt that by staying under the arm of the British, it would keep the Cape government from coming back at them with another war. They knew that they would not try to take on the British. So they voted to stay under the arm of the British for protection purposes only, not because they really liked the British. And on March 18th, 1884, the Disannexation Act that the Cape Boer government passed in September of 1883 was accepted by the British. So now they are fully under the British arm. So basically, in the end, the Basuto people got to keep their guns, and they were able to prevent the white settlers from taking their land. And most importantly, they avoided being absorbed into what would eventually become apartheid South Africa. The Basuto chiefs were able to hold on to most of their past authority while they were under the British arm. So they still got to have the majority of their authority. Now, on October 4th, 1966, Basuto land gained its independence from the UK, from the British. and the name was changed to Lesotho. They are a member of the United Nations, and they are a member of the African Union. The king of Lesotho at this time was King Moshoeshoe II, and the nation became fully sovereign. So basically, Basuto land became what we know today as Lesotho, a totally independent and sovereign country that is sitting smack dab in the middle of the country of South Africa. So if you've ever wondered, how do we as a people gain independence? How do we become an independent nation from our enemies? Well, Lesotho is a good example of one way to do that. As always, guys, I thank you for coming to watch and listen. And remember to like, share, and subscribe and help me get to 1,000 subscribers. I'll see you soon.